Imagine waking up tomorrow, grabbing your phone, checking your bank account, and seeing that your net worth hasn't just gone up, but like it is literally tripled.
Right, and not over the course of a 30-year career.
Yeah, exactly. Not over a decade, but practically overnight.
Just a total sudden windfall.
Right. Now, I want you to scale that thought experiment up to an entire country. Picture a nation where the national income effectively explodes by nearly 300% in just 4 years.
Which is, I mean, that's practically unheard of.
It's wild.
Yeah.
We are talking about jumping from a modest kind of struggling baseline to levels of wealth that most developing nations spend, half a century fighting to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we are basically looking at the ultimate economic lottery ticket.
Which completely upends our fundamental understanding of how human progress is supposed to work. Because we're conditioned to view national development as this slow generational grind.
Like heavily reliant on decades of incremental policy shifts, right?
Exactly. But the data we're looking at today just totally shadows that model.
It really does. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack an incredibly dense 15-page academic research report. It's titled Global Perspective on Development Leap, Comparative Analysis of the Guyana Model and World Human Development Trends.
It's a bit of a mouthful, but the data inside is, well, it's fascinating.
Oh, for sure. We have stacks of these granular data sets tracking global and regional metrics from 1990 all the way to 2023. And our goal today is to answer one central, deeply complex question.
The big mystery.
Yeah. When a country like Guyana experiences this kind of vertical economic takeoff, is it a true miracle of human development? Or is it like a digital illusion masking deep structural cracks in the foundation?
And to even begin answering that, we really have to throw out the traditional metrics people usually hear on the news.
You mean like GDP?
Yeah, gross domestic product. If we just look at raw cash, we're only getting a snapshot of the treasury, right? Not a picture of the actual society.
Makes sense.
So we need a much more sophisticated measuring stick. This report anchors its analysis in the Human Development Index, or the HDI.
Okay, so break that down for us. What exactly is the HDI?
So it was specifically designed to force economists to look past the money and look at the actual people. It measures 3 core dimensions. First, how long and healthy your life is. Second, how much access you have to knowledge.
So education.
Right, education. And third, your basic standard of living. It takes those 3 things, lifespan, education, and income, and synthesizes them into a single comparable number.
I see. Well, I want to focus on that global baseline first, because to understand an outlier, we have to, understand the norm.
Yeah, establish the control group.
Exactly. I'm looking at the visual design of the charts provided in the report, and the contrast is just stark.
Yeah.
On the left side of the page, we have the world's progress from 1990 to 2023. It starts at a score of 0.60 and slowly, painfully creeps up to 0.756. I mean, it basically looks like a gentle rolling hill.
And that rolling hill represents massive, coordinated global effort. I mean, that slow climb is the result of eradicating certain diseases, expanding global trade, standardizing basic education across entire continents.
It's hard-fought progress.
Exactly. And importantly, it's really fragile, because the data shows a devastating drop between 2020 and 2021, where the global average actually fell back to 0.742.
The pandemic effect.
Yeah. It's a textbook example of how vulnerable human development is to global shocks. Years of incremental gains in life expectancy and income were just wiped out in a matter of months.
Wow. But then, and this is where it gets crazy, you move your eyes to the right side of the chart in the report.
But the data just completely loses its mind.
Literally.
Yeah.
It tracks Guyana from 2019 onward. While the rest of the world is dipping and struggling to recover, Guyana's line just goes vertical.
It doesn't even look like a trend line.
No, it looks like a sheer cliff face. By 2023, their score reached 0.776. They didn't just recover from the pandemic, they blasted right past the world average.
Compressing it entirely.
Yeah, they leaped from 125th place globally to 93rd place in just this impossibly short window.
What's fascinating here is that moving up over 30 spots in these global rankings is a total statistical anomaly. The index is designed to be sluggish because human lives change slowly. Countries normally fight tooth and nail for a decade just to move up, like 3 or 4 spots.
And Guyana jumped 30.
Yeah. When a nation bypasses 30 countries in a few years, it breaks the standard models of linear development.
Okay, let's unpack this. I keep thinking about this in terms of physics. Global development is like a massive cargo ship, right?
Sure.
It takes miles and miles of open ocean just to turn around or pick up a few knots of speed. You have to overcome the momentum of thousands of tons of steel moving in the water.
Right, massive inertia.
Exactly. Meanwhile, Guyana has essentially strapped a rocket booster to the hull of a dinghy and blasted completely out of the water. But, I mean, you don't get that kind of propulsion out of nowhere. What exactly is the raw fuel burning inside that economic engine?
The fuel is unprecedented, unadulterated income generation. The report classifies this specific trajectory as a nouveau riche or sudden wealth growth model, and the numbers behind this are almost difficult to process.
I have the raw data set right in front of me, and you're right, the acceleration is dizzying. Let's trace the gross national income per person.
The GNI.
Yeah, the GNI. So the actual raw wealth circulating in the economy divided by the population. In 2019, Guyana sat at $12,837.
Okay.
By 2020, it jumped to $18,423. In 2022, it crossed $35,000. And by 2023, it hit an astonishing $46,959 per person.
It's just staggering. Now compare that to the rest of the planet. The world average for 2023 was just over $20,300.
Wow.
So in less than half a decade, this nation went from sitting well below the global average to commanding a per capita income that is 2.3 times higher than the rest of the world.
2.3 times. That is an absolute explosion of capital.
It really is.
But, this introduces a major mechanical problem with how we measure success. Because if that development index is an average of health, education, and income,
right,
and the income number suddenly just goes to the moon, doesn't it drag the overall average up with it? Like it makes the country look like a utopia on paper, even if the schools and hospitals haven't changed at all?
Yes. That phenomenon is central to the report's findings. It's called the decoupling effect.
Decoupling.
Right. The economic indicators have completely detached from the social reality on the ground. The financial data is sprinting ahead, while the social indicators are still, walking at their normal pace.
Which brings us back to that thought experiment from the beginning. If my personal income quadruples tomorrow, the effects on my life are split. I can immediately upgrade my material reality, right?
Absolutely.
I can buy a new house, I can fly first class, I can eat at expensive restaurants. That is instant gratification. But I cannot instantly purchase a PhD.
No, you can't.
I can't walk into a store and buy a second language.
Yeah.
I definitely cannot buy an extra 10 years of biological lifespan.
You're describing the time lag effect of social development. Wealth accumulation, particularly when it's driven by rapid resource extraction, like offshore oil discoveries, alters the national treasury overnight.
The money is just deposited.
Exactly. The money is there, but the institutions required to turn that money into human well-being operate on a completely different timeline.
Let's really dig into the mechanics of that lag. Because having the money is one thing, but deploying it is another. Human bodies don't run on dollar bills, they run on calories, clean water, and medical care.
Very true.
So let's test this wealth against the ultimate biological metric, life expectancy. What happened to the health system when this sudden wealth collided with a global crisis?
Well, the life expectancy area chart in the dataset provides a brutal stress test for this time lag theory. We already noted the global dip, right? The world average life expectancy fell from roughly 72.5 years in 2019 to about 71.2 years in 2021.
Entirely due to the pressure of the pandemic.
Exactly.
So a drop of little over a year. Tragic, obviously, but it represents a system bending, not breaking entirely.
Right. But look at Guyana's trajectory during that exact same window. Their life expectancy plummeted to a shocking 64.32 years in 2021.
Wait, 64 years? That is an 8-year drop.
It's massive.
That isn't bending. That is a catastrophic structural failure. But this is what is so deeply confusing to me. Their wealth explosion started in 2019 and 2020, right?
Yes, the money was already flowing.
They were already seeing massive influxes of capital into the national accounts. So why couldn't that money stop the bleeding?
Because of the physical reality of building a healthcare infrastructure. That 2021 data point, which the report highlights as a deep gap, reveals the profound fragility hiding underneath the economic boom.
Yeah.
You can have $1 billion sitting in the central bank, but you cannot instantly materialize a fully staffed intensive care unit.
I mean, think about the logistics of it. If a local government suddenly gets a massive budget increase, what happens on day one? Nothing.
Exactly nothing.
They have to pass legislation to allocate the funds, then they have to draft requests for proposals to build a new hospital wing. Architects have to draw the plans.
Supply chains have to deliver the concrete and the steel.
Right. That process alone takes years. And even if you fast-track the building and import the most expensive MRI machines in the world, who is running them?
And that's the human capital bottleneck. It's the most severe constraint. You can import ventilators overnight. You cannot import a locally integrated, culturally competent network of respiratory therapists, specialized surgeons, and critical care nurses.
That takes a generation.
It does. Training a specialized doctor takes a decade. Building a culture of preventative medicine takes even longer. So when the pandemic hit in 2021, the healthcare system had to fight it with the infrastructure of their past, not the wealth of their present.
Wow. It's like living in a house with a collapsing roof during a Category 5 hurricane, and your only defense is, like, a briefcase full of cash.
That's a great analogy.
You might be rich, but you're still going to get wet until you actually have the time to hire the roofers and fix the structural damage.
Yeah, exactly. However, the data from 2023 offers a really crucial counter-narrative. Following that violent drop to 64 years, the life expectancy numbers rapidly repaired. They rebounded to nearly 70 years, specifically 69.88.
Tracking upward. But still, bouncing back almost 6 years in a 24-month period is incredibly fast.
It is, and it demonstrates that the new wealth is finally beginning to act as a buffer. The initial shock overwhelmed the fragile system, sure, but the capital injection is now compressing the recovery timeline.
So the money is working.
Yes. They're rebuilding and fortifying their health infrastructure faster than they ever could have without that national income. The time lag is still real, but the wealth is effectively shortening the duration of that lag.
Okay, so if physical infrastructure and health systems require this massive runway to get up to speed, what about the institutions that build minds? If we turn the page in the report and look at the education data, I have to imagine the friction there is even more pronounced.
Oh, absolutely. The education metrics provide the clearest view of how soft power grows compared to hard capital. When we look at the global baseline, the world's mean years of schooling, which measures the average education received by adults 25 and older, is 8.77 years.
Okay.
And the expected years of schooling for a child entering the system today is roughly 13.04 years.
And when we look at Guyana, a country that is currently generating 2.3 times the global average in wealth, their education numbers track almost perfectly with the global average, right?
Almost identical. Their mean years of schooling is 8.70, and the expected years is 13.02.
So they are running parallel to the rest of the planet in intellectual capital, despite practically lapping the planet in financial capital.
Which perfectly highlights the profound inertia within educational systems.
I want to break down why that inertia exists, because to me, it goes back to the difference between upgrading hardware and upgrading software.
How do you mean?
Well, with all this new wealth, the government can easily upgrade the educational hardware tomorrow. They can bulldoze crumbling schools and build state-of-the-art academies. They can ensure every single student has a high-end tablet and blazing fast internet access.
Right, but the hardware is totally useless without the software. And the software of an education system is incredibly complex.
The curriculum?
Yes, curriculum development.
Yeah.
It's the pedagogical training required to take a teacher who is used to, say, rote memorization and teach them how to facilitate dynamic critical thinking. It's the systemic capacity to offer advanced placement courses or specialized vocational training.
And there's a biological clock on education that no amount of money can speed up.
Yeah.
Like a child's cognitive development just requires time.
Exactly. You can't just throw $100,000 at a 10-year-old and expect them to absorb a high school education in 6 months.
Right. They still have to sit in the chair, do the reading, and mature over the course of 12 years.
Furthermore, there's a generational inertia of family expectations. In a rapidly shifting economy, especially one transitioning into heavy industry or resource extraction, families have to see the value in keeping their kids in school.
That's an interesting point.
If a booming local industry is offering massive, immediate salaries for unskilled manual labor right now, the incentive to stay in school for another 4 years to get a specialized degree actually diminishes in the short term. The opportunity cost of education becomes higher.
That dynamic is fascinating. The very wealth that could fund a world-class university system might actually be pulling young people out of the classroom just because the immediate financial rewards in the boom sectors are too tempting.
It creates a paradoxical drag on the overall educational metrics. And, this forces us to look beyond the national averages. Averages smooth over the rough edges of a society. They tell us what the country looks like from an airplane. We need to land the plane and see how this wealth is actually distributed on the streets.
Because an average income approaching 50 grand suggests a society where financial anxiety has been virtually eliminated. But we know that wealth doesn't fall from the sky evenly.
Never. To measure the uneven spread, the report utilizes the Inequality Adjusted Human Development Index, or IHDI.
Okay, so how does that work?
Inequality essentially acts as a penalty tax on a nation's development achievements. Globally, the uneven distribution of health, education, and income erodes the world's development score by nearly 22%.
Wow, a massive chunk of human progress is lost simply because it isn't shared.
Exactly. When we apply this lens to Guyana, the internal divisions become really clear. The inequality in education is relatively low, around 10.4%. This tells us that access to a basic classroom is relatively standardized across the board.
That's good news.
It is. However, the inequality in life expectancy is much higher, sitting at 14.9%.
Meaning that while almost everyone can get a seat in a school, not everyone can get a bed in a hospital, or afford preventative care, or live in an environment free from industrial pollution.
Spot on. And this brings us to what I think is the most startling contradiction in the entire data set, the Multidimensional Poverty Index, or MPI.
Right, because this index doesn't just look at whether someone has a dollar in their pocket.
No, it looks at severe deprivations in daily life. Lack of clean water, lack of cooking fuel, malnutrition, inadequate housing.
I am staring at this poverty data right now and honestly trying to make the math work in my head. The overall head count is incredibly low. Only 1.8% of the population is classified as living in multidimensional poverty.
And on the surface, a 1.8% poverty rate seems like a massive, undeniable victory for the economic boom.
It does. But the breakdown of what is actually causing that poverty is deeply alarming. For that vulnerable 1.8%, housing issues account for 11.4% of their poverty burden. But nutrition, literal access to enough caloric and nutritional value to sustain a healthy body, accounts for 26% of their poverty index. We have a country generating nearly $47,000 per citizen, printing money at a macroeconomic level, yet a quarter of the suffering for the most vulnerable people is driven by literally not having enough food on the table.
It's a huge disconnect.
How does a booming economy leave people starving?
By creating localized hyperinflation without localized redistribution. This is a classic symptom of sudden wealth driven by a highly centralized, capital-intensive sector.
Like oil.
Exactly. Consider how an offshore oil boom works. It requires billions of dollars in specialized infrastructure and highly trained international engineers. It does not require a million local farmers or retail workers.
So the wealth is heavily concentrated in a very specific geographic and corporate footprint.
Yes, the industry generates immense national revenue, but it doesn't directly employ the majority of the population. However, all those high-paid workers in international corporations, they flood the local market with cash.
Which drives up prices.
Exactly. They drive up the cost of housing. They drive up the cost of groceries and basic services.
So if I'm a local resident working a traditional job outside of that boom sector, my wages haven't tripled.
Not at all.
But the cost of a bag of rice or a gallon of milk just doubled because the local economy is suddenly catering to all this new wealth.
Precisely. And unless the government aggressively and intentionally redistributes that centralized wealth through robust social safety nets, targeted nutritional assistance programs, or massive agricultural subsidies, the rising tide does not lift all boats.
In fact, for the most vulnerable, the rising tide just drowns them faster by making basic survival unaffordable.
That's a grim way to put it, but it's accurate. It perfectly illustrates the limits of gross national income as a metric. The wealth is real, yes, but it is siloed.
And looking at how opportunity is siloed naturally leads us to another massive divide in this data, which is the gender balance.
The gender dynamics in this report present a really fascinating paradox. We start with the Gender Development Index, the GDI, which measures parity in basic achievements. Guyana scores a 0.992, placing them in the absolute top tier globally.
A score that high means they are essentially at full parity between men and women when it comes to the foundational metrics of health, knowledge, and living standards.
Yes, and in some areas, women are actually leading. When we dive back into the education data, women in Guyana have surpassed men in expected years of schooling.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The data points to 13.3 expected years for women compared to 12.7 years for men.
So the pipeline is working. Women are staying in the classroom longer, they're pursuing higher education at greater rates, and building more intellectual capital than their male counterparts.
Definitely.
And that success seems to be translating into political power as well. I'm looking at the Gender Inequality Index, and female representation in Parliament is sitting at an impressive 36.6%.
Which is a monumental shift when you consider that back in 1990, Female representation was only at 11.5%. They have essentially tripled the amount of female voices in the highest levels of national leadership.
So we have women dominating the classroom and taking significant control in the political sphere. The narrative here looks like a complete triumph of equality.
It does until you look at the broader labor market. This is where the narrative completely collapses.
Hmm.
Despite having more education, female labor force participation is staggeringly low. It's just 39.6%.
Wait, less than 40% of women are actively participating in the workforce.
Yes. Compare that to the male participation rate, which is 61.75%. Because of this massive chasm in economic participation, Guyana's global ranking on the Gender Inequality Index falls to 114th.
That is a massive discrepancy. Their overall development rank is 93rd, but their gender inequality rank is 114th. We really have to unpack the mechanisms behind this drop-off. You have a system that successfully educates women, gives them the tools to succeed, and even elevates them into the halls of government. But somehow, that exact same system completely locks them out of the basic economy.
It's a wall.
Yeah, why is there a wall between the classroom and the boardroom?
It forces us to examine the sociological structure of a boom economy. When rapid growth is fueled by heavy industry, resource extraction, or massive infrastructure projects, those sectors are historically, culturally, and structurally dominated by male employment.
Ah, I see. So if the new money is building oil rigs, laying pipelines, and expanding mining operations, the jobs being created are inherently skewed.
Exactly. And beyond the physical nature of the work, consider the operational demands. Boom sectors often require transient labor, extended weeks in remote locations, or totally unpredictable shift work.
Which is tough for anyone.
It is. But if the sudden economic growth hasn't been matched by an equally massive investment in social infrastructure, things like affordable, accessible childcare or robust family leave policies, women are systematically forced to choose between participating in the new economy and managing the unpaid care economy at home.
Wow. So even if a woman holds a specialized degree, if the primary engines of economic growth aren't creating jobs in sectors that are accessible, or if the society just hasn't built the support structures to allow her to work those demanding hours, her intellectual capital is essentially sidelined.
It highlights a critical institutional failure. The economy grew, but it didn't diversify. The wealth is being generated, but the mechanisms to allow half the population to participate in that generation are broken. It is profound waste of human capital.
And speaking of profound costs, we cannot look at this rapid industrialization without calculating the physical toll it takes on the planet. We've talked about the human cost of the time lag. Let's talk about the environmental cost of the rocket fuel.
The report addresses this through the Planetary Pressures Adjusted Human Development Index, or PHDI. It's a relatively new metric that forces a society to look in the mirror and ask, how much of the Earth are you consuming and how much carbon are you emitting to achieve this level of prosperity?
I mean, what happens to a nation's carbon footprint when their economy triples in size?
The data presents a pretty nuanced picture, actually. The global average for carbon dioxide emissions is 4.536 tons per person. Guyana is currently operating slightly below that threshold at 4.356 tons per capita.
Wait, really? That is actually surprising. Given the vertical takeoff of their economy, I would have expected their emissions to be just off the charts.
Well, they are keeping the per capita carbon emissions relatively in check compared to the industrialized world. However, carbon is only half the equation. The index also calculates the material footprint, the sheer volume of biomass, fossil fuels, metal ores, and non-metallic minerals consumed.
Right, the raw stuff.
Exactly. The global average is a staggering 12.7 tons per person. And when you factor in the total environmental pressure of Guyana's rapid growth, it levies a massive penalty on their development score.
I see the scatterplot data in the report. Factoring in the planetary cost discounts Guyana's overall development progress by roughly 10%.
10% of their human development achievements are effectively negated by the environmental damage required to secure them.
It presents the ultimate catch-22 of modern global economics. You have a developing nation that finally has the resources to lift its people out of poverty, build hospitals, and fund schools. But the blueprints for that kind of rapid development have historically always been drawn with heavy material extraction and environmental degradation.
Always.
It's like trying to build a 100-story skyscraper in the middle of a quiet neighborhood without kicking up any dust or making any noise. It's impossible.
And the international community demands that developing nations grow cleanly and sustainably. But the planetary budget for carbon and material consumption was largely exhausted by the nations that are already developed.
All right, it's a bit hypocritical.
It is. The Guyana model illustrates that while it is mathematically possible to fast-track income, it is incredibly difficult to decouple that rapid growth from severe environmental pressure. They are following the traditional carbon-intensive path because, frankly, an alternative blueprint for vertical economic takeoff just doesn't exist yet.
Bringing all of these threads together, I want to zoom out and look at the final trajectory outlined in the report's conclusion. We started this deep dive looking at a country sitting in 111th place back in 1990, classified as having medium development. Today, in 2023, they have surged to 93rd place, officially crossing the threshold into high human development.
And we have to highlight the watershed year of 2022. In a single 12-month period, Guyana jumped an unbelievable 16 spots in the global rankings. That level of velocity is just unprecedented in modern socioeconomic data.
The report provides a final radar chart that synthesizes all of these contradictions. It paints a picture of a nation that has brilliantly capitalized on its resource endowment to build a massive economic engine. But its future is entirely dependent on fixing the structural cracks we've been discussing.
The conclusions are definitive. The economic leap is real, but its sustainability is in question. To maintain this trajectory, they must drastically accelerate the resilience of their health systems to survive the next global shock.
Right.
They must aggressively intervene in the labor market to close that gender participation gap. And they really must figure out how to distribute wealth to eliminate the micro pockets of severe nutritional poverty hiding in the shadow of their massive GDP.
It's a sobering reality check in what we consider a development miracle.
Yeah.
I mean, we've spent this deep dive unpacking a staggering data set. We watched national wealth explode by nearly 300%. But beneath that headline, we found the fragile reality of a healthcare system that buckled under pressure. We saw the disconnect of citizens struggling for basic nutrition in an incredibly wealthy economy.
Yeah.
We explored the paradox of women dominating the educational pipeline only to be shut out of the labor force. And we calculated the planetary price tag of rapid industrialization.
The Guyana model proves that a vertical economic leap is possible in the 21st century, but it also serves as a glaring global warning. It proves that capital, no matter the volume, cannot instantly overwrite institutional inertia.
No, it can't.
You cannot instantly purchase a resilient hospital system, you cannot buy generational educational equity, and you cannot magically bypass the environmental physics of heavy development.
It fundamentally forces us to redefine what progress actually means. I want you listening right now to think about your own community for a second. If a windfall of money, billions upon billions of dollars, was suddenly deposited into your local government's accounts tomorrow, what would actually change?
In the short term, maybe not much.
Right. Would your local schools instantly have better teachers? Would the wait times at your local emergency room drop to zero overnight? Would the hidden inequalities in your neighborhood just vanish? Or would your community experience the exact same time lag we are seeing in this data, where the bank accounts are full, but the physical and social foundations take decades to catch up?
Which leads to the final, and perhaps most vital, takeaway from this research. The true test of human development isn't how steep the income graph is or how high the national treasury climbs. The real alchemy of a society is figuring out how to convert every single dollar of that newly minted wealth into an extra second of a healthy life and another page of knowledge for the next generation. Until a nation figures out how to make that conversion efficiently and equitably, wealth is just a sterile number on a spreadsheet.
That is an incredibly powerful framework to leave on. It shows us exactly where the work still needs to be done, regardless of how rich a nation looks on paper. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the mechanisms behind the miracle. Keep looking beyond the headlines and keep questioning the numbers.